In this video, we're going to import data from Google Search Console into Airtable. We're going to do that using the Data Fetcher app. So the first thing we'll do is install the app from the Airtable app marketplace. Once we've done that, we need to sign up for a free Data Fetcher account or sign in to our existing one. We'll then close the app and start setting up our base. So the first thing we need is a table called Pages with a primary field called URL and a data type of URL or field type of URL. We'll then create another table called Days, delete the fields that Airtable puts in there by default, and create two new fields. So the first one will be called end date. We'll type formula and the following formula. Now you can find this formula in the blog post that will be in the description for this video. Now you can see that this is just the current date. Now we're going to create another field called start date that is this end date minus 1 week. Again, it's a formula field, and you can find the formula in the blog post that goes along with this video. Now what we've set up here are two fields with the current date, the date a week ago, and we're going to use this when we connect to Google Search Console to set the period for which we want to pull in data. So we're going to be pulling in data for a week at a time. Now we'll create the table where we're going to pull our metrics into. We're going to call this weekly metrics. We'll delete the default fields and create a new field called page that's linked to pages, and we'll disable linking to multiple records. We'll change the primary field to ID with type auto number because we're pretty much just going to ignore that field. We can then delete the fields that are already, the records that are already created by Airtable. Finally, we'll create a field called week end date with type created time and disable the time field. So when we pull in the records, which will have the Google Search Console data, this field will get populated with the current date. So back in Data Fetcher, we'll click Create Request. On the Create Request screen, we'll change Request 1, the request name, to Weekly Metrics by Page and Query. Then set the request method to post. Now we need to find the URL of our property in Google Search Console. So looking in Google Search Console, on the left hand side, the URL is listed here. And so for example, I'm going to do it for datafetcher.io. So the full URL is the one with HTTPS in front of it and a slash afterwards. So just to be clear, this is the URL with a slash. Now we need to go to urlencoder.org, put that URL in and encode it. Back in Data Fetcher, we want to set the URL to the following and replace this site URL here with our encoded URL from the previous step. Now we want to add a request body with the following value. Now again, this is in the blog post that goes along with this video. And for this end date and start date, we're going to create a reference to our days table. So we'll click our cursor in between the two colons, the speech marks, sorry. We'll click this button here. And for the end date, we'll choose days as the table, end date as the field, and then the record. And we'll do the same for start date. So you can see that those references are now included in that body, and that's going to replace the values when the request runs with the formula values from the days table. We'll click use current for the output table so that the data gets output into weekly metrics, and the same for the view, so it's output into the grid view. We'll change the write mode to append, so this just means every time we run this request we want to pull in the data and append it to what's already in the table. Finally, click save. Now further down we want to add an Oauth connection, so we want to actually connect to Google Search Console. So next to Oauth connection, click add, and of the available options, click Google Search Console. Select the Google account you want to use, click allow, and then we can see that the connection is going to use Google Search Console. So finally click run. The request will run and it's going to open up this response field mapping modal where you can set how the fields that come back from Google Search Console are going to correspond to our weekly metrics table. So for the first one, rows keys 1, this is going to have the page URLs back from Google Search Console. So change the data type to link, change the table field to page. For the next one, rows keys 2, this is going to have the keywords or queries from Google Search Console. So leave the data type as single line text, and in this create field input, enter query. You can do a very similar thing for clicks and just change the create field input to clicks. Same for impressions. For CTR, which is click-through rate, we want to change the data type to %, and the create field input to CTR. Position, just change it to position. And then on response aggregation type, we can just deselect this because we don't actually need this bit of data. Now when we click confirm, Data Fetcher is then going to create all those fields for us in the weekly metrics output table. It's then going to run the request again. So if you click save and close the app, we can see that all of our Google Search Console data is pulled in. So each record corresponds to a page or URL, which is automatically linked to the pages table. The weekend date here, so this record is the data for the week that ended on this date. And then each record has a query, the number of clicks, number of impressions, the click-through rate, and the average position of our page for that query. Now, obviously there's not that many records here. You might have a lot more, you might have hundreds of queries and hundreds of pages. Anything up to 25,000 will be handled by the app. Beyond that, you need to go into the advanced settings and turn on pagination. So the final thing we want to do is schedule this request. So open up the app again. You'll first need to upgrade if you haven't already. Then click this schedule request, and we want to repeat it every week. So select which day you want it to repeat on. You want to only do it on one day a week, and then when that runs, it's going to append the new data to the existing data, and you can track stuff over time. So once you've selected the day you want to run it on, click save, and then Data Fetcher will automatically run that each week.